Hello and welcome to the volunteer orientation for the Tarpon Springs Aquarium. Who are we? We are a family-run business, and I'm going to go over the family members that you're going to be encountering at the aquarium. So the first three here are we are the owners and the managers. So I'll usually refer to us as managers. First, we have my father. My name's Grant, by the way. This is me right here. But this is my dad, Scott Conger, and he's the one that started the aquarium back in 1990 over on the sponge docks. So he, of course, very knowledgeable, lots of experience, and he's the one that started it all. So you're going to be seeing him quite often. There's also my sister, Paige, and that's her right here. She works a lot with the animals. She does just about everything actually. So you're going to be working with her quite often when you're doing animal care and whatnot. And then of course me, I'm the volunteer coordinator. I do a whole host of other things as well. But as far as you're concerned, whenever you have an issue or scheduling problem or want to change your schedule, anything that has to do with your volunteering at the aquarium, you'll want to usually talk to me. You can, of course, ask my sister and my father if you have any questions, and they happen to be right there. But ideally, you want to talk to me most of the time. Other family members that you're going to see a lot at the aquarium, we have my uncle Jeffrey Conger, goes by Jeff. It's him right here. He helps us out a lot with different stuff, so you may see him. I do want to note he is not a manager, so if you have a question or something, you'll want to ask one of us up here. And then my younger brother, James, right here. James does have mild autism. He's very high functioning, and you may not even be able to tell at first. But if you ever have a problem with him, or if you notice him having a problem or something like that, make sure you come tell one of us so we can address it. We haven't really never had any major issues or anything, but of course, just to be on the safe side. Um, Hopefully you've read through the policies already. If not, that's okay. Of course, we're going to be going through them all right now. I'm going to go over them briefly, kind of give examples. If you haven't gone over them, please read these yourself after the video. You can go to tarponsprings.aquarium.com, and then under the volunteers tab, you should find this. And these slides as well if you want to go over the slides. So safety and security, very important, of course. This is the most important thing that we'll go over in the video. And it seems like common sense, but just to be on the safe side, if you or a guest is injured, make sure that you tell one of the managers. So, of course, again, the managers are myself, my sister Paige, and my dad Scott. So make sure you tell one of us right away. Like if an animal bites somebody, you hurt, someone trips and falls, something like that, and then we'll take it over from there. If we're busy doing something, if it's an emergency, just tell us anyway. Interrupt us, whatever we're doing. Another thing, I do know there's a little bit of stigma to this, but if someone's doing something that they're not supposed to be, then make sure you let us know, and that includes volunteers, if we have any employees. Don't confront them yourselves. Make sure you let one of us know. We don't want to have any drama, and we'll handle it. And of course, this last one, very obvious. Don't bring anything bad to the aquarium. Attendance. Make sure that you come. If you're not going to come or going to be late, make sure you let me know ahead of time. Ideally, more than the day of, or earlier than the day of, or the night before. I'll let it slide. But if you keep, telling me, hey, I'm not going to be there today, then I will start marking those as absences. And how that works is we do mark um, unexcused absences, as you may be familiar with in school, where basically you didn't tell us ahead of time and you just didn't show up. If you get enough of those, then you won't be allowed to volunteer, and we'll let you know. Animal care, make sure you're careful. You might have worked somewhere else with animals or have a pet or something like that, and you think that you know what you're doing, and you might know what you're doing, but just to be on the safe side, act as if you don't know what you're doing. So be super careful. Listen exactly to what we say and how to handle the animals, and if you're ever unsure, make sure you come get one of us to help you whenever you're having to interact with an animal. I do want to mention or highlight this word minimally. So interact with animals minimally. So that means only when necessary. So when we tell you, one of the managers tells you, or when you're showing a customer something briefly, and even that you want to keep to a minimum as well. So like for example, you may show the underside of a horseshoe crab to a big group of people. That's fine. Don't overdo it. And I know saying don't overdo it's a little subjective, but you'll know what I mean over time. You want to only do it occasionally, and if no one's around, you really shouldn't be touching any of the animals at all. And of course, if you're touching them, be careful. Um, right, moving on. So this sounds a little scary, but we're pretty nice people, so you don't have to be too worried as long as you're following the rules. And that is, we can discontinue your volunteering whenever we want. Kind of goes without saying. But as long as you're following the rules and listening to what we have to say, you should be fine, be able to volunteer as long as you'd like. Speaking of following the rules, it says right here you must follow the instructions, and if you have a issue, make sure you ask. Feel free to ask questions. Actually, it's usually a good sign if you're asking questions, because that means that you're trying to truly understand what we're telling you. So if you're ever confused, let us know. We won't look down on you for it. Okay, this is an important one because it gets messed up pretty often, and can have some long-term consequences. And that is, make sure you only do what we authorize you to do and show you how to do. So in other words, unless one of the managers, myself, my sister, or my dad, explicitly shows you and tells you you can do something, you're not allowed to do it. So the problem arises usually when another volunteer will try to show you something, or you may be tempted to show another volunteer something. Something small even. It might seem simple and convenient to just show them, and you think you're helping us out actually, but we don't do that, and that's because it's a bit like a game of telephone where you tell someone something, and it gets a little muddled, right? So that can happen when you're telling someone how to do something as well, and we want to keep things consistent. So make sure you are only doing what we tell you. Moving on, of course, don't ask for tips. Pretty straightforward. So this one is a good one for you all, and that is if you have an immediate family member, and we threw grandparents in there, even though I don't think they're technically immediate, but any grandparents, parents, or guardians, siblings, children, spouse, that's it. They are allowed free entry into the aquarium, and the reason I say that's it is because you can't invite your cousins or any other extended family or anything like that, and expect that they can come in for free. And by the way, for your immediate family, that only includes admission. So that does not include animal food. You can't, slip them a few cups of food for the animals, or snacks for themselves or something like that. Dress code. Now the dress code, if you're in school or recently were in school, you may remember them having a very specific dress code, or if you're lucky, they didn't have too harsh of one. But we also have a dress code, but it's not specific. So you probably or should know about as well as we do what is acceptable to be worn in public when you're working. So this is something you would wear to be professional and comfortable. So you want to kind of balance those two things. So it's something you would wear to a professional work. Now we will give you a T-shirt to wear, but if we haven't given you a T-shirt yet, or we're printing more, or we ran out or something, then just wear a plain T-shirt, nothing fancy, just plain, ideally just completely solid color T-shirt if possible. Okay, and accessories. So make sure that you keep accessories to a minimum. Ideally, just don't even wear them at all. But if you really feel inclined, you can get away with maybe one or two of these things on this list. But like I said, keep it minimal because it can interfere with what you're doing. Make sure your shoes are closed-toed and close-heeled, of course, because you're going to be working outside sometimes. Okay, so here's just a few general things that are important to go over. If you are volunteering when there's during lunchtime, in the middle of the day, we'll probably give you a lunch break. Um, don't take longer than 30 minutes. We don't time you. It is an honor system, but we will notice, of course, if you're gone for more than 45 minutes, let's say. And on top of that, when you're somewhere during the day, and sometimes it's not very busy, you may be tempted to entertain yourself with your phone, a book, something like that. And that's not acceptable. You have to actually ask us if you want to work on schoolwork. And we won't let you play games, of course, by the way. I'll go over cell phones actually on this slide. But if if you have schoolwork or tests to study for and we're not very busy, we may not, but we may let you do that. If we give you permission to work on schoolwork or study for a test or read while you're waiting for customers, when a customer does come, you have to make sure to put that down immediately. You don't. A customer should look at you and not think they're interrupting you when if they have a question or something like that. So make sure you put that right away when there's a customer around, even if they're not asking you a question, even if they're just around. You put it down and you wait and you look pleasant. And if you're really really bored, you can ask us for something to do. If this is something you may forget about, but if you have a change of information, especially like your phone number or something like that, make sure to let me know. If you are keeping track of your hours for a scholarship or something else, then make sure you do that on a daily basis, trying to not have to guesstimate so much. We will sign off on these. Ideally, it depends on how it's set up. Sometimes we just sign off at the very end. Sometimes we have to sign it every day. Just ask us, of course. But make sure you're disciplined about that. Speaking of discipline, we do have some general professional standards, and that is to be respectful of pretty much everybody. That includes us and the customers and other volunteers, but anyone you come across anywhere, you'll want to be respectful to them. And if you're tempted to not be respectful, you have a rude customer or something, or another volunteer says something not so nice, don't be rude back, and don't try to engage with that person and try to cause a conflict that you didn't intend. Just ask us. We're great mediators, and we'll figure it out. And depending on the situation, we'll address it. And make sure you're engaging. I'll go over this more later, but you want to be active when you're talking to actively talk to customers. You don't want to be keeping to yourself too much. Wear your name tag if you have it. If we haven't given you one, then you just have to wait on this. But once we give you a name tag, you can wear it. If we forget to give you a name tag, you can remind us too, by the way. So we do evaluate our volunteers. We don't announce the schedule or anything like that, but we'll occasionally just say, hey, we're going to have a quick review. It'll only be once in a blue moon, but we'll just go over what you're doing, and you'll have a file at the aquarium, so we'll just record a few notes on the file. It shouldn't take longer than 15 minutes at most. The only exception to that is when you first start volunteering, you will do a 2-week review, where after 2 or 3 weeks, we'll go over what you're doing internally, and then maybe with you if necessary. And that is to determine if you're a good fit for the aquarium. And we may have to relieve you of your volunteering, but otherwise you'll continue to be a volunteer. So all fine and dandy. And then we have cell phones. Now, cell phones is something that everyone struggles with, especially younger people. Even myself, I'm at least partially addicted to my cell phone. But it's important that we go over this because cell phones are actually not allowed to be out during the volunteer hours. So if you need to use your cell phone to call your parents, text your parents, or something like that, or if you're expecting a call from your parents, let us know ahead of time or ask us for permission, depending on the situation. That's very important. And we're going to be strict on this cell phone thing. You might get a warning, but if you keep using your cell phone, you might not be allowed to volunteer. So keep that in mind. That's probably the one you're going to have to remember or keep in mind most often. So before we open, so if you have a morning shift, you may not have to worry about this if you come in later in the day. But if you come in, I believe it's at 9, then I just want to go over briefly what you're going to be doing. So in the morning, you're going to be preparing food for the animals and to sell to customers and helping us clean. It's a little open-ended because it'll probably be different every time a little bit, so we'll have different things for you to do. If we have a lot of volunteers, we may use a whiteboard to write down a list of things that need to be done, but we'll go over that with you on the day that you come in. So this is a very important slide, a lot of information here that I'm going to go over. So when we're open, this is an important time of day because the managers, myself and my dad and my sister, we're going to be busy, so you're going to be a bit more on your own. And if you're younger, you might struggle with this. If you're older, high school, college, then I expect you to handle this 100%, but we'll go over it nonetheless. So first thing is no goofing off, of course. You don't want to be unprofessional. So a situation may be like a customer comes in and you're joking around with your buddy that you're volunteering with. You can talk to your buddy and maybe say a joke and laugh a little bit, but if you're too boisterous, too loud, you may make customers feel uncomfortable, or they may not want to ask you a question because they'll feel like they're interrupting. We don't want that. So and we don't really act like that generally. So if we see you acting like that, it's going to be a problem. So don't goof off. While you're not goofing off, what you can do, first thing, when you first start at least, is to learn. So there's going to be a lot of signs around. We may have supplemental little papers and informational sheets at different stations. And I should probably go over what a station is. So we're going to have different stations throughout the aquarium that we'll assign you to, and you may stay there for a duration of time. And while you're there, there's going to be signs and stuff by the tanks that you're in charge of watching. Read those signs. If there's nobody around, read the signs. They have a lot of good information on them. Feel free to ask us questions if you don't understand something about a certain animal. You can do your own research about animals that you're watching on your own time, like not on your phone while you're watching them, but after work if you're really into this. be careful about the information that you learn or are sharing, because I've had situations where volunteers will hear something from, their second uncle, and they start saying it as fact, and let's just say it's stuff that isn't scientifically accurate. So make sure you're careful. It's a good idea to run it by us, the managers, before you start sharing information. And we might want to learn too, so make sure you share any information you learn about the animals with us. That'd be great. Once you've learned, then of course you can start sharing that knowledge, and that's a big part of why you're here, is to inform the public about these amazing animals. So you'll get better at this with practice if you're not already good at it. If you're already good at it, then go to town. Be informative, and I also put on here, be assertive. Some of you may struggle with this, especially if you're a bit more quiet. But of course, if someone asks you a question, feel free to elaborate, tell them about stuff, tell them about the animals. And here's the tricky part, is that if you're not getting any questions or something like that, and there's people around, they're looking at the animals, feel free to jump in. So an example would be like the horseshoe crab again. So the horseshoe crab is someone's looking at it, and you're just sitting there, and you can tell them, "Hi, did you know that the horseshoe crab is over 450 million years old?" And they might look at you a little funny, or they might go, "Wow, I didn't know that." And they say, "Well, I can show you the underside of one if you'd like to look," and then you can show them. And at that point, sometimes that'll start a conversation, and you can really impact someone's visit positively, a lot. Now, I did put next to be assertive, not too much. Most of you won't have to worry about this. Your problem is going to be not being assertive enough, and you're going to need to work on talking to customers. A few of you are going to have an issue with oversharing, where like with my horseshoe crab example, you tell them about the horseshoe crab, and they go, "Oh, okay, cool, cool, cool." And then you just keep telling them stuff, and they don't want to be rude and tell you to stop. But after telling them, maybe two things, and they're not really asking you a question or responding very excitedly, then you want to just kind of leave them be. And then, of course, your other job is to sell animal food. So how this is going to work is we're going to sell tickets at the front register, and you get those tickets, and then you'll have an exchange rate at certain stations. So like four tickets for 1 cup of food. You take 4 tickets, you give them a cup of food. And you'll have a cooler or some sort of packaging where you'll give them the food out of. Once you get low on cups, you'll want to come to the front entrance building and ask for more, and we'll have a whole bunch there, so you can come get some more. And keep your tickets. Keep the tickets. We'll go over this in detail on your first day, but you'll want to keep your tickets with you. And you're going to actually use those and exchange them for more food. So we'll make sure you have the right amount of tickets to get more food. If you keep losing the tickets, it can be a problem. Now here's an important point here below that one, and that is to demonstrate every time. And what I mean by that is, when you're selling food to customers, it's important that you tell them how to feed them. So, for example, the stingrays is one of the more hands-on one. You may want to actually feed a stingray in front of them, or show them with a piece of food, and for them to see, and pretend to be a stingray and eat it out of your hand, with your other hand, not with your mouth. That'd be pretty gross. But you want to demonstrate every time, and that is, sometimes people come in and they'll say, "Oh yeah, I already know how to feed them," if you ask. So like you'll say, "Hey, do you know how to feed them?" And they'll say, "Yeah, yeah, yeah." But they may or may not, but sometimes they'll say yes, and then they don't really know what they're doing. Usually what you'll want to do is they come get the food, and then you say, "Okay, I'm going to show you how to feed them," assertively. That you don't want to mess around with this, because they may wander off. And you say, and then you go over it, and we'll go over the different how to feed them at different stations in person. But even if they think they know how, sometimes they don't. And if they say like, "Oh yeah, someone showed me earlier" or something like that, then you can let them go. That's fine. And then, second most important thing of the whole presentation here is protecting the animals. Number one was protecting yourself, when we went over that earlier. Number two, protecting the animals, keeping them safe. So you want to make sure that there's a list of rules at each tank generally, and you want to make sure those rules are being followed. So you'll want to know what the rules are, so make sure you read them and go over them, and we'll probably go over them with you in person. But if we don't, make sure you know what the rules are, read them on the signs, and you want to make sure those are being followed. So one thing, oh, I mentioned here, one thing that's not on most of the rule lists, but something you may want to keep in mind, is that we want people to rinse their hands off before they touch in the tanks. And the person at the front register should tell them, but if you notice they're not, you can remind them, say, hey, make sure, if you haven't already, to rinse your hands off in the wash station. And we'll show you where the wash station is, of course. And then, no hurting the animals, or don't let the animals get hurt, rather. There's been all sorts of crazy stuff, and I'll just tell you a couple examples. One is where someone was trying to lift a stingray out of the water and toss it across the tank. That was a pretty exciting one. And then this happens all the time for some reason, where people want to pick up, especially the little turtles or something, and flip them upside down, or run them around the tank or something like that. Treat them like a stuffed animal, basically. Obviously, that's not okay. And most of the tanks, the touch tank has a 2-finger rule, where all the tanks, any tank where they're allowed to touch an animal or something like that, they're not allowed to grab. It's only touch. And if you notice people are being too rough or poking or pushing, you'll know when you see it. If they're not being good, you can go over there and tell them, hey, make sure you follow the rules and be gentle. Okay, and you can tell them. Usually, once you say that, then they'll be more careful. And you don't have to call them out specifically. You can even say something like, hello, everyone. I just want to remind you that the rules are no picking up the animals. And the person that's picking up the animal will probably get red-faced, but then they'll know to stop picking up the animals. There's been a few cases in the past where people, even after being told, still break the rules, don't listen, something like that. You can try to remind them again, but if they're not listening to you after the first, or maybe after the first, you can try to remind them again. But after the second time, if they're not listening to you, you want to come get one of us. So myself, whoever happens to be working, myself, my sister, or my dad, and we'll address it from there. You just tell us the situation. And we have had to ban people from the touch tanks and even kick them out before. So very, very rare, but it is something to keep in mind to protect the animals. Okay, so if you're here in the evening or late afternoon after we close, then you're going to be, this is a little bit like the morning, where it's a bit open-ended, but generally you're not going to be here very long, maybe 15 to 30 minutes at the most, and we close at 5, so you'll be here till about 5:15 to 5:45 at the latest, and you're going to help us clean up. So you tidy up your station. We'll go over how to do this in person, but you return all your food, all the tickets, and then you help us clean up. If you have nothing to do, then you just come ask us is there anything else you need help with before I head out, and we may give you something to do. If we give you permission to leave and your parents here, then of course or if you drove, then of course you can leave. But don't just leave. Make sure, this bottom point here, is you inform us before you're leaving. If we give you permission, that counts. But if you're going to leave, make sure you say bye, or just say, hey, I'm leaving, before you go, so we don't lose track of anybody, especially the younger volunteers. But this applies to everyone. All right, and that's it. So thank you for watching the orientation video. If you have any questions, my name is Grant. My phone number, you can text me, is 727-688 3901. My email is tsaquariumvolunteers@gmail.com. Texting is easier, so do that ideally. Both of those, all of that information is on the tarponsprings.aquarium.com under the volunteers tab, and you'll find it. You can click the policies, or this video should be there too, and you can review it if you have any questions. So best of luck volunteering, and thank you.